All right. They told me to come up here and bring the energy, so I'm summoning my most enthusiastic voice. If you're here for this, you're in the right place. If you're not, you're in the wrong place. But to introduce myself, my name's Barrett. I'm a product marketing manager here at Webflow. Currently focused on our enterprise products, but been with Webflow for a bit over 6 years, actually. So done a fair amount of every kind of thing. And I'm here with my teammate Alex, who's going to come on after me. And we're going to talk about some of the stuff we mentioned in the keynote, right? We talked about how we're evolving symbols to components. We're going to double-click on that and kind of look at what we launched today, as well as some of the stuff that's coming in the future. So with that, I'm going to start and talk a bit about why design systems matter, why we're thinking about symbols and components and kind of the problems that we're trying to solve. Then we'll look at the customers that we've seen do some very creative things to kind of approach design system thinking and incorporate that into the work that they're doing, and kind of through those examples get a sense of some of the problems and challenges that we're trying to help customers solve. And then I'll hand it over to my teammate Alex, who's going to talk more concretely about the roadmap for the past, present, and then the future of what's coming with formerly known as symbols, but now components. So I will start talking about the web design process at a very simplified level. Obviously, you have content, what are we going to say on this website? Design, how are we going to visually present that information? Development, how do you turn that vision into a reality on the web? And then the afterlife, what happens when the website's up and you're making updates and you're maintaining it? And I think historically, Webflow's really focused on this middle part, right? Design and development, kind of bringing those two together into a visual interface, right? And condensing that process and allowing you to move much faster from idea to reality. But Webflow has not thought historically a lot. We haven't invested as much as we really ought to into helping people maintain those websites down the road, right? Because reality is that the life cycle of a website is going to spend much more of its time in this green part than in the development phase. And so when we think about the ways that development tools and design tools have evolved to support larger websites to make that maintenance process easier, we're thinking about the same thing at Webflow. So we want to make sure that Webflow is built in a way that sets customers up for success when it comes to the long-term usability and maintainability of that site as it evolves. And so on that front, though, thankfully we have some awesome customers who've shown us some of the ways that they've kind of worked around these challenges and developed design systems that get at some of the more nuanced issues around two main things. Really, one is site maintenance and like style system health, making sure that you have a clean style system, something that's not confusing to work with. And then overall, just collaboration and speed of development, right? So these are the two things that, ideally, if we can do our job better, we can make your lives easier on both of these fronts. And so on the first front, as I mentioned, one of the bigger challenges that comes when scaling and maintaining a project long-term is what's called a bloated style sheet. In other words, like a class system that somewhere along the way, after changing hands between a bunch of designers, has somewhat lost its sense of self because everyone starts winging it and writing classes willy-nilly. And so having confronted this problem a lot, one of our longtime partner agencies, Edgar Allen, came up with a framework called Knockout. It was aimed at really reducing some of the kind of issues surrounding class systems and how teams work together on those class systems. So what they laid out, and some of those issues really, right, we've talked about, are classes that are poorly named, so a newcomer doesn't know what a certain class does, or classes that are very specific. Somebody creates a one-off class that is used to fix padding on one button on one page of the site one time, so you don't really use it very much, and you're not really sure what to do with it if you're kind of running across it in your project. Or, like I kind of mentioned, some new contractor comes into your project and builds a page super fast with no regard for whatever system might be in place, going kind of off script and winging it. And so with these problems in mind, the Edgar Allen team came up with essentially a kind of self-evident kind of class naming system and a guideline system for naming those classes that's meant to make it easier for people to understand and kind of get on the same page about how and how classes are named and how styles are structured within a project. And so, as they describe it, this process is probably going to be more time-consuming at the beginning, and maybe is something that's actually takes a little bit of getting used to. But it's going to pay off in that long-term maintainability of the project, right? When it comes to reducing redundant styles and just making that website a lot more maintainable for the team. So long story short, as exciting as impressive as this system is, it's still, relatively speaking, a lot of work, right? They have to lay out all these guidelines on how to name classes. And I think this is really because of the way that Webflow is built, right? It's built on top of CSS. CSS class naming is its own challenge. But Webflow doesn't necessarily make it easy for teams to scale a design system that they're creating, or even document and communicate the standards by which they're building and maintaining that system. So as we think about the ways that we were trying to improve the way that people build, especially as those sites are scaling, like we're talking about, these are some of the issues that we're trying to make better, trying to solve. Another example that we think is really useful is an article written by Matthias Pitters from the agency Master Flowmaker. In his article, he laid out 3 kind of roles that his agency thinks about when building Webflow sites. And those are the architect, the composer, and the publisher. And one of the important roles here is, especially for the context of this talk, is the architect. And the architect's job in this framework is to basically build the UI units, the building blocks of this website, so that the composer can then take those pieces, compose the different pages, as the name might suggest, and then the publisher kind of goes in, fine-tunes, and tweaks the content so it's ready to go live. But it's, of all these 3 stages and of all these 3 roles, the architect's work is the one that probably has the biggest impact on how the rest of the project and the development process unfolds. And so in the context of this example, what we're trying to ask ourselves is, how can we make the architect more powerful? How can we allow the architect to build more powerful, more adaptable, and more usable, more ergonomic building blocks for the rest of the team that comes in after? Because of course, this is not a story about just the people, developers, designers, people who are really familiar with the nuts and bolts of Webflow, but thinking more expansively about everyone in the web development process and longer term, as Alex will get into, how we can make components a power and kind of the engine for the overall development process across that whole team. So with these examples in mind, we know that these design systems that our customers are creating help people manage and build more efficiently. And so, like I've kind of hinted at, when we think about this problem in terms of our product, we want to think about how we can support these directions and these projects, but also even foster some of this design systems thinking approach to web design. And so the answer, spoiler alert, is components. And so with that, I'm going to bring Alex on, who's going to take over and talk more concretely about a roadmap. So Alex. Cool.
What's up, everyone? Alex Diaz. It's a pleasure to be at Webflow Conf, right? So I want to emphasize something that Barrett was alluding to, which is that components are the key to fostering and supporting a more holistic design system approach, especially when building websites on Webflow. And to be clear, this isn't a new idea. This isn't a new roadmap. Not only have we actively been building for this moment for symbols to become components, but it's part of a larger play to enable stronger design building principles for individuals and teams. With the appropriate amount of power, flexibility, the kind of things you would expect when using code. So on that note, let's take a little blast from the past, look back on how we got to this moment for symbols to become components. And in the beginning, it started with the fact that symbols were originally just centered around exact copies of elements. And they've been extremely useful for things like navs, certain forms, footers, creating layouts that are the same across your website for every single instance. This is the foundation of components. And I know we all understand that because this gave you the superpower to manage reoccurring layouts and content more efficiently across your site. But that's it, right? And when you think about supporting a design system, there's some clear limitations the symbol's presented, at least in that state. When you take a step back and really try to consider how to improve on this, you want to enable more flexibility to adapt to instances outside of an absolute copied layout. How can you start to thinking about content strategy, let alone patterns, in your larger design system? It's pretty hard. This is why we say components is the evolution of symbols, and you'll see that type of language a lot when we talk about components. Because components are custom elements created by Webflow users to reuse their designs across pages and sites. And what I mean by that is you can customize them for any scenario without needing to unlink from the design source. I'm jumping ahead, though. Evolution comes in small steps. We all understand that as well. So a significant stride forward to this evolution came in 2020 with the introduction of content overrides. In a nutshell, content overrides allowed designers for the first time to give each instance of a symbol distinctive content. So you have the same buttons, but different call to actions. And while you could easily copy and paste your site with unique copy for each new button, and that's a fair workaround, no shade, I do want to emphasize, re-emphasize actually, the value of what symbols were meant to unlock for users from the very start. And that's establishing a design system at scale. A reusable layout that accelerates your workflow and helps you maintain your website easier, especially in the long run. That's the important part. So this slide, because the instances are all tied back to the source, you can modify the component's design, and the changes will all cascade to each instance immediately. Something you just couldn't do with that copy and paste workaround. It's limiting. And I'm talking about swift updates, little effort, simple as that. But there was an opportunity when introducing additional flexibility. The structure of a website, especially a website with a lot of pages, can get pretty damn complex. We all know this. So it makes sense that you not only want to make a component for a recurring layout like a hero image, but also place and combine your components within each other to be adaptable to your needs. It was no shocker then that we then launched a long-standing request to add and put symbols inside of one another. Enter nested symbols. Nested symbols unlock the ability to place reusable components inside of one another. It provided this new level of microcontrol, especially for smaller components and UI patterns within larger recurring layouts. And by the way, if you're familiar with atomic design, where the basic thesis is around building design systems more deliberately with a clear hierarchy and order, all of that, guess what? Nested symbols supported that practice. In short, it involved what reusability meant when building layouts on Webflow. Which brings us to the present day. We're continuing our investment in reusability by supporting functionality to accelerate not only your workflow, but introducing additional control. All to give designers a powerful and expressive visual web development solution you would come to expect when using Webflow. What we announced at WebflowConf is just one step forward towards a larger work on establishing a design system that scales with you. With the introduction of more ways to work faster, agile, granular control, while helping you keep your brand design consistent across your entire website. It makes sense then, considering all this, why we chose to rebrand symbols to components to reflect this dramatic expansion what symbols can do. Or should I say the artists formerly known as symbols. For starters, we simplified how you create and manage properties for your components so you can quickly change them and move on to the next task at hand. Now you can select elements in their component instances directly on the canvas. From there, you can define new properties to customize each instance based on your design needs. Pretty powerful. Significantly simplifies the workflow of modifying your instances. We also made components much more intuitive to engage with through the ability to edit content again directly on the canvas. By the way, this has larger ramifications, not just for designers, but it makes things easier when you think about site contributors. Being able to modify the text directly on the canvas, if you think about marketers, you think about content editors, they get much more involved and independent with this kind of feature. Because these type of collaborators are the kind who want to build additional landing pages by themselves but they want to use components pre-built by their teammates, i.e. the designers. Now, we talked about how it's easier for you to define properties that are modifiable within a component. This all sounds very familiar. However, we're also adding to the breadth of the properties available to you. With visibility properties, you can show or hide elements in components. The benefits that this offers you is substantially giving much more flexibility in how you design. It allows you to really establish true variations in your design structure. This is a big deal. Not only have we unlocked a way for you to change the text between different components, but now there are structural variations you can do. This means if you want to hide links from your menu to create a more simple nav bar, hell yeah, go for it. Or maybe you want to show certain buttons on certain pages because you don't need them everywhere. You're good to go. Being able to toggle on and off the visibility of elements in your components ultimately allows you to configure any layout variation to your desired design scenario. Also, speaking of using components in different scenarios, let's talk about CMS. By being able to connect components to CMS content, you can display CMS in components across project pages without needing to unlink from that source of truth. So think about this one for a moment. I said project pages. This is the first time you can display CMS data in components for your dynamic landing pages, plural, pages, while preserving that consistent design that we're trying to strive for. These new UX improvements and capabilities will expand the scenarios designers can leverage components to build and maintain websites. That's always been the goal. It's velocity, it's flexibility, and control at scale, empowering folks to contribute, which is great, while minimizing design inconsistencies, not so good. This is the spirit, if not the purpose, of great design system management. But the work doesn't stop here. I think we all understand that. We're already investing energy in additional capabilities, additional usability updates, and the goal, everything I just talked about. Reusability, optimizing your workflow, additional control. So, following the theme of this talk, we did the whole blast in the past. We chatted a little bit about what was launched today. Let's check out what we're looking to build on top of this robust foundation that is now components. I want to give a small caveat. While I'm so excited to share all these things with you, the images are conceptual. So before you go about sharing it on Twitter, you know exactly who you are. Keep that in mind. All right, let's jump ahead. So one of the first things to look forward to in our future roadmap, we're not only investing in expanding the cases you can leverage components, but also how to improve the way you manage and organize those components. That means additional management capabilities with ways to organize and simplify it with efficiency, as well as introduce the ability to preview certain components when you need to without having to implement them and undo it, saving you time and effort. And this isn't about saving time and effort with your workflow. I'm sure many of you can imagine when new site contributors jump on a project and they're still learning your brand's design system, it can be a little tiresome, a little bit more of a worry as well. So this will help support that. Additionally, we heard a lot of excitement around being able to display CMS content in your components during our private beta phase. And we have every intention on expanding on that capability. Soon you should expect the components not only in collection pages, which is what was announced today, but also right into collection list and fully connect components across all the collection fields that you want. That's not all you have to look forward to. We can all agree a key trait to a component is the ability to adapt to different design requirements. And design requirements doesn't only mean visual, it means stylistic requirements as well. So I'm incredibly excited that we're going to be enabling you to modify the styles of an instance without affecting the component's design source. That means a future where designers can affect different style variants of their components and reuse them multiple times while maintaining that consistent brand that they're trying to use across all instances. Well, these capabilities are amazing. Something significant that we're excited to come out sometime the next year is our version of truly addressing design system management across the Webflow platform. And it's the ability to share components across multiple websites, allowing not just freelancers and agencies, but multiple working groups with multiple websites to accelerate their site development by reusing components across all the different project pages and maintaining that portfolio brand consistency. In fact, when you zoom out a bit, what we're trying to accomplish at the end of the day is enabling designers and non-technical users to have stronger collaboration and contribution through great design building principles. Components helps further this. I think you kind of understand the theme where this is going. It encourages development of thoughtful design systems. Also, something to note, the workflow of component-based page building, the theme that we're really trying to hit on here, it ties directly back to the dreams and hopes of those customers that Barrett was alluding to earlier, empowering more and more folks to not only get involved with developing on Webflow, especially through self-serve means, creating their own pages, but more importantly, in a safe way that doesn't break a layout. This would effectively bridge the gap between the full power of the designer and the more slimmed down content editing tools that come with the editor. Bringing a whole new level of folks onto Webflow, let alone how much more powerful templates will become because of this. Which brings me to one of my final slides. Across the themes that you've seen here and the important stuff that we touched on for Webflow, there's a world where components are essentially going to become the foundational block for building. To achieve that, Component will deliver on 3 key promises, though. Your goal is to hold us accountable to this, by the way. I'm talking about, number 1, being flexible and adaptable to your needs. Visibility property will bring us a step closer to this level of control that I was speaking to. Over time, we expect to expand on that. Number 2, compatible across your workspace so that you can invest in components once and leverage it as many times as you need. Today, we took a step closer of components in collection pages. And over time, we expect to see that happening across sites within your entire workspace. But finally, it's being frictionless with how your team operates to ensure not only continued adoption and use of components throughout your site's life, but also ensuring that it's easy to maintain components in the long term. It's the name of the game here. Today on Canvas Controls gave a great step forward in terms of that seamless user experience that we all strive for. In the future, you can expect to use components available across your entire workspace. And if you think about how roles and permissions plays a part here, you can also understand the level of governance this unlocks for you in that same vein. So with that, we're at the end of this presentation. That's all for me, folks. If you're curious about everything I just spoke about, no worries. You can head over to the blog, the Webflow blog, and check out a recap of the keynote, everything we spoke about here. There's also our product release notes on webflow.com/updates. Or you could just jump on the designer and try out components. I would appreciate that. It's my personal project, so do me a solid there. But I just want to say thank you. You all are the reason we do what we do here. You're the reason why we work so hard, not only for Webflow Conf, but to launch these features, hear your feedback, and see what you build on top of an already robust and growing platform. So with that, I'm Alex Diaz. Thank you on behalf of me, on behalf of Barrett. I'm going to hand it over to Emily. Thank you, everyone.